Mark Rogers TV, the voice of college football, back at it with a live stream here Monday afternoon. It's 5 o'clock Eastern time, 8 o'clock on the West Coast, and most importantly, it is 7 o'clock, of
Other
course,
way.
in the Mountain Time Zone. Correct? Or I'm going the other direction with that. Yeah, 5 o'clock, 2 o'clock on the West Coast, and 3 o'clock. Man, I make fun of people doing that, and I just did it. 2 o'clock on the West Coast, and 3 o'clock, most importantly, in the Mountain Time Zone, where Utah will be hosting Washington. And the first big test for the Utes, we've got Joseph Silverswag on the line. You can join him on Utah Rivals and also the Pac-12 blog. Joseph, how you doing today?
I'm doing pretty well. How are you doing, Mark?
I'm doing great. I appreciate you coming back on to talk about the Utes. So a couple games under the radar for most of us in regards to the Weber State game and Northern Illinois, but tracking the scores on the bottom line throughout the afternoon, a bit of a struggle against Northern Illinois. Not that I'm surprised by that, because they typically play the Power Five extremely tough. I believe the final was 17-6. So can you give us an idea of how you project that into this week in regards to what looked good, what didn't look good, and what the concerns are?
Yeah, I'd say the impression that I was left with at the end of the whole thing was this is probably what it felt like for Power Five teams to visit Utah in 2006 and 2009 when they were still part of the Mountain West. I mean, NIU just came out kicking and fighting, and they were really, really physical. They have a lot of good players on defense. Everybody knows about Sutton Smith at this point, and if you don't, you should. But there's a lot of talent on that defense, and they just kept punching Utah in the teeth and kept punching them in the teeth all night long, and it was a struggle all night long for Utah to find the end zone. I don't think they scored until the third quarter. The good news is Utah's defense is as good as they've ever been right now. They're ranked number one in the country, defensive efficiency, number one in let's see, yards per pass, number 5 in rushing yards per carry, number 5 in completion percentage. I mean, just absolutely top shelf numbers across the board. Not the best opponents, but most teams aren't playing the best opponents right now, so it's still good to see. And it was just a defensive struggle throughout. I think the one thing that I took away that was positive for the offense, Zach Moss, a running back, struggled a little bit. Offensive line really struggled. NIU wound up with, I want to say, 12 tackles for a loss, including 6 sacks. It was a long night for Tyler Huntley. But given the amount of pressure that he was under and the lack of time that he had, he still completed 65% of his passes, was over 9 yards per attempt, no touchdowns. I looked that up. I found 1,000 games or so where a quarterback had thrown for over 9 yards per attempt, over 62% completion. There were 14 of them where they hadn't also found a way into the end zone. It was kind of a weird, fluky game for Tyler Huntley, who actually performed well under significant duress. I think the concern moving forward is the receivers not catching the ball as often as they should, and the offensive line not playing as well as they should. They looked out of position. They didn't have a ton of energy a lot of the time. Of course, all of that can change when you go from playing, Illinois and DeKalb to play in Washington under the bright lights and Rice Eccles with the crowd cheering. That's certainly what Ute fans are hoping for. And frankly, if the energy and attitude of the offensive line doesn't change, Washington's going to walk right through them. They're not going to have any trouble at all.
Absolutely. So, of course, as you disclaimed at the end of the defensive statistical spiel, of course, so if they can maintain those defensive national rankings after the Washington game, then that would be fabulous. But we know that they are good on defense. That's actually based on the box score I'm looking at right now. Northern Illinois had 14 tackles for loss in that game.
It was bad. They were in the kitchen all night. I mean, there was just no way out, and every other play somebody was running for their life. It was rough, and it was the same thing. Like I said, that Utah used to do to big teams. You can go watch the Sugar Bowl, and they had 2 defensive ends who wound up playing outside linebacker in the NFL, and just like Sutton Smith's going to do, and they were just too quick and too fast for the big, heavy, slow-footed offensive lineman that wins Pac-12 games. and they really didn't have a chance. And the help blocking from the tight ends and the running backs wasn't as good as it should have been. It was really all about pass and run blocking that I think the core of the offensive problems on Saturday.
Yeah, so everything you says makes total sense because on the surface, converting 14 tackles for loss at Northern Illinois versus playing what has been over the last 2 to 3 years one of the best defensive fronts and front sevens in college football doesn't translate. But different motivation. Go back, look at the tape, shore some things up, go over some technique, go over some cohesion issues, possibly along the offensive front. Things change. You know, teams step up, players step up to big situations.
Yeah, Ute fans certainly hope things will change. They need to. It's been interesting watching the coaching progression. Kyle Whittingham's post-game press conference, he was as mad as I've ever seen him about the offense. And he's had plenty of opportunities to get mad about the offense over the years. But he was just so frustrated. And then he came back for his press conference today. And he said, you know what? I looked at the tape. I'm not as mad. I think I might have overreacted. And I think there's some truth to that. The Utes had a lot of good long drives, and then they would take a sack or a tackle for a loss or have a penalty or something that would just kill it. And so it feels like they're closer than the final score made it seem in terms of performance. The one thing that also has me concerned that's maybe a bigger deal because it's more unusual is special teams. They had a field goal kick blocked, and that's actually the second field goal kick that's been blocked this year. Weber State blocked one too. They had a muff punt, which is the second muff punt of the year, and I'm thinking three kickers' names ago before. Matty Gay is the kicker, and he was great. He won the National Kicker Award last year, but he missed a kick as well, a relatively short one, 40-something yards. So special teams cost the Utes a lot of points. By my reckoning, maybe somewhere between 6 and 13 points because that muff punt cost them a really short field that they probably would have been able to come away with some points on. And those are mistakes that they're going to have to clean up too. And it's just boneheaded stuff. People not paying attention. People not where they're supposed to be. So, and that's very, very unusual. Kyle Whittingham personally coaches the special teams and does a great job. And Utah special teams has been among the best in the country for years and years and years. But right now is far from that. The punt return blocking is nowhere. The kicking game hasn't been good, and they need that. They need that. Even if their offense is able to put it together, they're going to need a good special team performance to beat Washington.
How good are the Utes? Well, we're conjecturing on that right now with Joseph Silverswag. You can join him on Pac-12 blog and also Utah Rivals. And he's joining us to set up a huge game in the Pac-12 coming up this weekend with Utah 2-0 with the first major test of the season. And considering their schedule, they're going to have to knock off a giant here at some point to make a play for the South Division Championship. They host Washington. That's a late Saturday game for those of us on the East Coast on ESPN. Utah and Washington. I'm excited for this one. Britain Kobe's a guy that we talked about. I did on my prediction and preview video, and then also served it up to you as well. He missed 2 years because of his LDS, over 500 yards receiving back in 2015, and looks like he's back in the flow. 6 catches for $129.
Oh, he looks so good. He's just a hair over 100 yards a game. That's all-purpose yardage. He does rush the ball now and again as a sort of a scat back kind of role, and a couple of passes where he's running across the formation that are pretty close to a pitch. But he is just everywhere, really short-handed, and making defenses look silly, which is what he does best. Surprisingly hard to tackle. He's definitely the one to watch. The Utes were really hopeful about their wide receiver core this year, and they've mostly been able to get open, but they haven't been able to catch the ball. There were a lot of drops against Weber State. We counted 6 drops against NIU. And keep in mind, these guys are wide open on these plays because of the cornerbacks that they're dealing with. These aren't tight coverage, reach out and stretch out and grab it with one hand kind of drops. These are shots in the numbers that they really ought to be catching. And you're starting to see Whittingham plays the depth chart really close to the vest, but you're starting to hear hints that he's maybe looking at some of the freshmen to take over for some of the guys who we thought were going to be the leaders in terms of receptions on his offense. In particular, names to listen for are Bronson Boyd. He was at Texas Tech a few years ago. He had a whole bunch of personal problems, took a year off, came to the Utes, and has been really good. And then Solomon Enos, who was a 4-star recruit out of, I can't remember if he was out of Arizona or Idaho, but out of the West Coast here, and is really put it on a show in practice and has started to make some really good plays. And he catches the ball, and I think that's what the coaching staff is looking for right now, because since the start of about the third quarter of the first game, Tyler Huntley has been putting balls on the money over and over and over again. He's making good decisions, but if you don't catch him, it doesn't matter. That 65% completion was counting those 6 drops. So you're looking at a really strong performance from Huntley if the guys could catch the ball half the time that they were dropping at close to 70% completion. And so Huntley's putting together a good performance, but he needs receivers who can catch.
Retain, forgive me. I gave you 6 catches. You had 8 catches for $129. I was trying to heighten the yards per catch average is what I was doing there for you.
He's a possession guy. He catches a lot of screen passes and stuff, so he'll get tackled 4, 5, 6 yards out. It's just, if you miss that first tackle and he's got some green to work with, he is very hard to track down. He's really quick on his feet. And for a little guy, he's surprisingly hard to tackle. You'll see big players hit him, and he just kind of squirts out of there like that.
Mark Rogers TV, the voice of college football, on the live stream with Joseph Silverswag from Utah Rivals. Also, you can catch him on the Pac-12 blog. Of course, right here, like, comment, and subscribe. We bring you the best conversations that you're going to find anywhere online. Discussion, debate, analysis with the best bloggers, broadcasters, and writers in the industry. And we have to talk this one up. Utah and Washington. And for a guy right here who picked Utah to go to the Pac-12 championship game and play a rematch against Washington in the Pac-12 championship game, USC helped the cause. It's no time, of course, in mid-September to be scoreboard watching, but Utah with a good loss for Utah, obviously.
Yeah, given the separation in schedules between USC and Utah, I think it's okay to scoreboard watch. Utah's North schedule is so hard. They've got Stanford, they've got Washington, and they've got Oregon. Those are the 3 teams that they play, and it's just brutal. And it's really hard to see them going through those 3 teams and not losing at least 1, if not 2 of those games. So you're going to need to beat USC to win the Pac-12 South, but you also need USC to lose another game. And Stanford was the best shot. It was early in the season. JT Daniels hasn't had a chance to figure out what he's doing yet, and that showed. You only play a defense like Stanford for the first time once. And I think it's a wake-up call for a lot of quarterbacks, and certainly was for JT Daniels. And so it was a good result, and one the Utes almost needed, even this early in the season, to feel like they were going to have a good inside track to winning the South, just because their schedule is so difficult.
Talking Utah football with Joseph Silverswag. We encourage you to join him on the Pac-12 blog. It's on Twitter. It's at Pac-12 blog. And then also at Utah_rivals. What are the websites, just to make sure those are correct? UtahRivals.com?
It's utah.rivals.com and then Pac12blog.com. Most of my stuff goes up on Twitter. I'd encourage people to follow me on my Twitter. It's just J Silverswag. That's it. ZWEIG. It's hard to spell, but I'm the only one, so you'll find me. So it's an exciting time. There's a lot of cover. I mostly do stats and kind of analytical basis. I have some of my own models that I use to project the Pac-12 seasons for everybody. I do those once a week. I do power rankings using those models once a week, and so some interesting statistical analysis. And if you're a Utes fan, I go really in depth on the numbers and pick apart stuff that other people aren't doing. So I think I'm an interesting follow, especially if you're interested in the West Coast of Pac-12 football.
We're college football nerds, Joseph, so there should be people watching that will follow you, because that's what we do. We just love it. So what are your projections on the Pac-12? What were they preseason, and what has happened in the 2 weeks of play that has possibly changed the model?
So one of the reasons I got into this is because I noticed time and again Utah being under I'm a Ute fan, and I noticed that Utah continually has been underrated by advanced metrics, things like FPI, S&P Plus, a massive rating system, those kind of metrics that look at yards per play and efficiencies and things like that. And so I started to do an analysis of those and see where they were lacking and see what they were missing. And one of the big areas that they miss is consistency in coaching staffs and particular coaches who tend to overperform models for a long time. Coaches like Peterson out at Washington, coaches like Kyle Whittingham. I haven't done a national analysis for this, but those two tend to be farther ahead relative to where the other models are. We had a little bit of movement in the models lately. The biggest changes have been Colorado, who is starting to really creep up. They had a nice win over Nebraska, have a wide receiver, number 2. If you can catch a Colorado game, it's worth watching just for this young man. He wears number 2.
Absolutely.
Spectacular player. He's all over the field all the time. Big, strong guy, really difficult to stop. Worth watching him. And then ASU, with that nice win over Michigan State, has been kind of climbing up the rankings as well. I'm proud of my rankings because I have been saying all off season, I said, don't get too excited about Chip Kelly, everybody. UCLA is in for a hard year. They just don't have a lot of talent. They don't tackle well. And they lost too much last year to be particularly good on offense. And so I'm got some Schadenfreude watching UCLA dive bomb just like I predicted they would. The team I didn't see coming was Arizona, and particularly Khalil Tate. I'm still waiting for Kevin Sumlin to figure out that he's got the best rushing quarterback in the nation on his team to design an offense around getting that guy out into space. Because Khalil Tate's amazing to watch, but he has just been absolutely stifled by their offense, and I think a little bit by teams having a year of tape on him and getting a chance to adapt their defenses to him. But that has been really surprising. Not just surprising to me, but that's been one that stood out to me as something I didn't expect to see happen in the Pac-12, where a lot of people were picking Arizona to be kind of the spoiler, also ranked contender to USC and Utah. And fairly, with a talent like Tate, I mean, you get a lot of wins all by yourself with a player like that, but it doesn't look like it's going to happen, at least in the first few weeks, and they'll see if they can right the ship. And that's the scary thing about Arizona is, what if the week that your team plays them is the week Khalil Tate and Kevin Sumlin figure out how to play football together, and he goes off for 400 all-purpose yards, and you lose to a team that's got 5 or 6 losses on the season because it took them so long to figure out. So that's the scary thing there, and you got to make sure that you're locked in for Arizona. But I'm really seeing USC, Utah, and Washington, Stanford being the contenders and the heavyweights this year in the Pac-12.
Good week for the Pac-12. So in week 1, Washington played extremely well, but all that matters on the scoreboard is, of course, the final score, and the result was a loss against Auburn. But if you watch the game, all you had to do is check out the box score. But I watched every play of that game because I thought it was the best matchup of the weekend, and I thought Washington looked really good. Sure, they couldn't handle Auburn's defensive front, but they showed, hey, we're going up against a top 10 or 12 team in the country, most likely. That's how it's going to play out. And we played them to the wire. If we played them 10 times, it would probably be 5-5. And that's how I look at it, beyond just the win and the loss, if we're evaluating the team and by extension, the conference. But obviously UCLA with a bad showing against Cincinnati, and Arizona doing what they did against BYU, losing to a team that only won 4 games last year. And it just wasn't a good week for the conference. But then, boom, this past Saturday, as you mentioned, Arizona State defeating Michigan State, who I think was overrated. And I even projected that at 5-4 in the Big Ten and 8-4 overall. But I think they're good. They're a good team. They're a top 25 to 35 team. So a really good win for the Pac-12 and Arizona State. And man, Arizona, wow.
But to say about that, we're just it's Pac-11 right now.
But yeah, to get to the player that you mentioned and highlighted out of the gate there, Laviska Shenault, I believe is how you pronounce his name, and he caught the game winner in Lincoln against Nebraska. Sorry, Navy Thomas, one of our favorite supporters here, who's a diehard black shirt guy. But yeah, touchdown in Lincoln, and made some remarkable catches in that game. Just a tremendous player that's under the radar. Hopefully, he will get some love, as will a number of people that play for Utah, because some are going to be checking out Utah for the first time this week. And by extension, they're going to be checking out Utah because they're checking out Washington as the Pac-12 favorite, despite the loss to Auburn. This kid, Chase Hansen, he had a very productive season last year. Very nice week this past week at Northern Illinois.
Yeah, he was playing strong safety last year. Was very effective, but put on about 20 pounds in the offseason. They moved him up to linebacker, which is his natural position. It's where he'll play in the NFL, where he's got a bright future. And he's loving the change. It's allowed him to pin his ears back, be more instinctive, and it paid off big time against NIU, where he had 2 sacks, fumble recovery, and a absolutely crucial pick six in the fourth quarter. The Utes were up at that point, but it was 7-6, and so one untied shoelace, one slip on the wrong piece of turf, one missed assignment, and suddenly the game flipped. But he picked off a screen pass and took it to the house 40 yards, and the Utes were up 11 at that point, and were able to hold on to that lead, which was vital part of their performance. One of their only 2 scores on the whole night, 2 touchdowns on the whole night, so it was really important. And he continues to be that kind of player. Look for him in particular. Been very effective on heel scrape plays. So he'll come around the outside of the line and use his speed to run down the whole length of the line and pick up a running back or quarterback from behind who's going on the other side of the line. And then he's very effective in pass coverage, as he demonstrated with the pick. He's just everywhere. He's just one of those linebackers who knows exactly where to be and is always there. Another guy who's been off to a really, really hot start. He got the game ball from the coaches last week. He's not the guy we talked about when we visited. It was Lecky Fotu, who's just a titan. But this is John Pennicini. He's a junior college transfer out of Snow College. Not a big guy, 6'1", 295. I mean, not a huge defensive tackle. But he has just been playing all out, no holds barred. He's been making a ton of plays. The Utah's 10th coach was former Wisconsin and Oregon State and Utah State head coach Gary Anderson. They hired him on as sort of a high-level assistant defensive line coach. And a big point he was making in fall camp was, I don't want only defensive end making plays. I want tackles going after the ball and making plays. And Pennicini has really taken that to heart. He's got a ton of tackles and has been a real challenge for defense to deal with. I think because they are selling out to stop Fotu. And then he gets a one-on-one matchup, and he's more than talented and skilled enough to take advantage of those things. So he's sort of a unheralded guy who you're not going to hear a lot about, but if you're really interested in line play, he's a fun one to watch.
Pennicini, a guy that wrapped up 7 of those tackles against Northern Illinois with a sack. So the tackles typically don't rack up the tackles, which is kind of an oxymoron, but that's the way the game's built and the defense is built. But he's a guy that, as you mentioned, Gary Anderson, and that philosophy is that you need more playmaking ability up front, pushing the pocket and disrupting plays in the backfield. Interesting stuff from Joseph Silverswag. You got to join him on Twitter at @JSilverswag. Also catch him on Utah Rivals and Pac-12 blog. And if you can't spell his name or you're not finding him, go to my Twitter. Go to my Twitter page. All you have to do is find the announcement. There are 2 of them of Joseph's appearance here. And you'll find his link right there, right to his Twitter. You'll find it, and you'll be able to track him for his insight into Utah and the Pac-12. Weber State, NIU are in the rearview mirror. Now it's 2-0. Utah hosting Washington, and one of the key games, obviously, in the Pac-12. Send your email to my Gmail, MarkRogersTV @Gmail. I sent out my second edition of my newsletter for the college football season. And I expect that to take past the college football season and it to be a year-long delivery to your email. That's all you're going to get. No more cluttering of the email box by me in particular. Not that I did in the past, but that won't be a thing. It'll just be one mailing per week, the newsletter, college football, right here from Mark Rogers TV, the voice of college football. And of course, like, comment, and subscribe. Also share the video. So you like what you hear from Joseph in particular for this video, share the video as well to folks that just love college football. And if you're like me, if you're a nerd, then you try to keep track of everyone and love the big games. And this is certainly a big one in the Pac-12. Joseph, anything that we've missed in this one? Because we know what the keys are typically in these type of events. We've got special teams and can't turn the ball over, got to stop the run, got to establish the line of scrimmage, all that. But any unique keys in this one with Washington in town?
I think that Utah is going to be able to succeed if they're able to get the run game going early. A lot of times it feels like Utah has to keep pounding on the door for a while before they're able to break through and start getting those yards. And that works most of the time, but I don't think it's going to be enough against Washington. So I'd like to see a lot of aggression and intensity from the offensive line, breaking open some holes for Zach Moss early. The reality is he only needs a hole. He can beat who they're going to put in the line, but he's got to get the offensive line to break those holes open for him. And if they're able to do that in the early going, it suggests to me that there's going to be a different dynamic this week than we've seen in prior weeks with the offensive line being slow to get going. And that would bode really well. I mean, the numbers you said are always really important looking backwards. I'm keeping a really close eye on drop passes for the wide receivers. And then on Huntley's accuracy, not even so much his completion percentage, but his ability to really put balls on the money. Sometimes he'll throw catchable balls that will slow a receiver down because they'll be slightly out of position. You won't be able to take the play in stride and get the extra yards. So I'm looking to see Huntley take that next step and lead his receivers and let them run through the catch and out into the open space and get some yards after the catch. Works really well for this group of receivers that Utah has, which lacks a really dangerous big guy who can just jump up and high point you and beat you deep. Most of what works for the Utes is crossing routes and out routes and things like that, and making a man miss and then getting into the open field. So in order for that to be effective, Huntley has to be exceptionally accurate, more than just making the completion, but making the completion in a way that lets the receivers catch the ball at speed and keep moving.
Also like to remind anyone just joining the chat that you've missed about 30 minutes of excellent Utah talk here with Joseph Silverswag of Utah Rivals and the Pac-12 blog. So as soon as we're done here, the video processes and posts, and then you can watch the complete conversation here at my YouTube channel, Mark Rogers TV, the voice of college football. Subscribe to my newsletter. Send your email address to markrogerstv@gmail. I think the people that are on the chat, the 60-some that have already signed up for the newsletter, and we're only in week 2, are pretty pleased with it. The feedback's been great, so I appreciate the support. And so you'll want to sign up for the newsletter with all sorts of stats and trends and stuff that you won't find anywhere else. And speaking of which, stats, trends, that sort of thing that you won't find anywhere else concerning the Pac-12, you go to Joseph's Twitter handle right there. We appreciate that. Joseph, we appreciate the time. I want to remind everyone that at 6:30 Eastern, we'll be back with Billy Gomilla from SB Nation and the Valley Shook to talk LSU and Auburn. Another huge one this week. I'll stick around. Sure. What's that, Joseph?
I'm watching that one for sure. I like that Tiger Bowl. It's always fun.
Yeah, that should be a good one as well. Yeah, college football junkies, we can't get enough. And this is a great time of year, and it's a really good week coming up here in week 3 before most teams hit conference play. But, of course, Utah's got to do that with the BYU game at the end of the year. So I'm going to stick around for a few minutes. If anybody wants to call in, 860-325-3687. I'll put the number in the chat, 860-325-3687. 3687. You guys asked for a call-in show. I've given you a number, and we will take a few calls before we shut it down and come right back at 6:30 Eastern time with LSU and Auburn. Joseph, we appreciate you stopping by. It's always a pleasure, and hopefully we can talk a number of times this football season.
Yeah, hopefully we've got good stuff to talk about. Thanks a lot, Mark. Have a good day.
Thanks, Joseph. Take care. All right. Again, that was Joseph Silverswag from Pac-12 Blog and also Utah Rivals. And if you're just joining the chat, it will post and process as soon as we get off the air so you can jump online and catch the entire conversation. Joseph had some great insight into Utah, and this is one of the big games that they have to win to get toward the Pac-12 championship. They don't have to win it. Here's the formula for Utah, I believe. If they can split against Washington and Stanford, and they've got Washington at home, Stanford on the road, then they almost have to beat USC at home. That breaks the tie. And basically, USC can go undefeated the rest of the season, and Utah will go to the Pac-12 championship game because they will have the head-to-head with USC. USC will have 2 losses in the Pac-12, so will Utah. I actually knocked them both down a peg in my preseason predictions, gave them both a 6-3 record. Utah with the tiebreaker against USC winning at home in a few weeks. I think that game's in mid-October. And Utah winning the Pac-12 South Division and a rematch against Washington in the Pac-12 championship game. The team that appears to be the very best in the Pac-12. Noticed a couple interesting notes, some injuries around college football. Rodney Anderson, Oklahoma running back, out for the season. I was going to do a post on his replacement and look at the Oklahoma running back situation. I may not have a chance to get around to that, even though I've got my Oklahoma colors on. It would have been a good time to do it. I want to let you guys know that we've got a ton in store for this week. So tomorrow night, Tuesday night at 9:45 Eastern time, I've got Jordan K., SB Nation, to talk Arizona State with Herm Edwards and the Sun Devils, fresh off that big upset against Michigan State. Then we've got Stephen M. Smith of Touchdown Alabama with the Tide opening up SEC play this week against Ole Miss, trying to hit all the big games, big previews on the games that matter, the most important games each week. That's my aim. So on Wednesday night, we're talking Ohio State football, of course, with the Buckeyes taking on TCU. I've reached out to a couple TCU contributors and am waiting to hear back from them. Florida State, Syracuse this week. We got Big Game James 36, James Coleman on the line Wednesday night as well. Steve Helwick talking Texas football. He works for the campus station there at the University of Texas, with Texas taking on USC. Also, I don't have the schedule right in front of me, but believe me, we've got it jam-packed with all the big matchups and previews of all the games that matter across the country. All the big games, trying to get to as many as possible. The other story I wanted to cover, and it's really more of just kind of a anecdote, but it's interesting to me, is that Alabama is the number 1 team in the AP poll this week, has passed Ohio State as the team that has been voted number 1 the most weeks at 106 to Ohio State's 105. That doesn't matter. It's an interesting anecdote. It doesn't matter. But I thought I would parlay that fun fact into kind of a measurement. And this is more of an off-season project, but maybe a discussion right now, but an off-season project of how we can rate all-time programs. How do we rate them? Well, we've got number of weeks at number 1 in the Associated Press poll or the coaches poll, which doesn't matter if you're number 1 in September, but obviously the teams that have been ranked to number 1 the most times are obviously they've been number 1 for a reason. They've racked up wins and they've been headed toward national championship contention. So that's one measurement we could use. We could use winning percentage. We can use national championships, conference championships. We can use other barometers, All-Americans and Heisman Trophy winners. Just a thought there as we march forward. So I was thinking about doing a video on that as well. All right, folks, the newsletter should be in your hand. If you don't have it and you're supposed to have it, let me know. I'm going to get that a little bit better organized through some automation coming up in the next several weeks. If you want to sign up for the newsletter, please contact me at MarkRogersTV at Gmail. And again, the phone line's 860 325 3687. Going once, going twice. We've got LSU Talk coming up at 6:30 Eastern Time with Billy Gomilla from And the Valley Shook. LSU and Auburn. And we'll see if the Bayou Bengals can back up the Miami effort with a win in conference against an Auburn team that's already beaten Washington. So we've got two teams that have already notched a significant win now facing off against each other. I appreciate the support, guys. You guys are the best. I'm contemplating what to do with this because it's just not needs to take off. It needs to take off. So I appreciate the support. I appreciate all the well wishes and the great feedback and the suggestions that you guys have. There's a whole lot of things that need to be done a little bit better for us to take it to the next level, then the next level, then the next level. So thanks once again for joining us. We had instant analysis all weekend of all the big games. And we will continue to do that until it doesn't make sense. And that's how we're going to try a number of things out. So you guys have a great hour here. You got 45 minutes of freedom. I'm going to eat. I've got some laundry. I've got some phone calls to make. I may produce a video. I don't know. What else can I get done in 45 minutes? And I will see you guys back here at 6:30 Eastern Time for LSU and Auburn Talk. And we will see you soon. Right here at Mark Rogers TV, the voice of college football.